We're going to go over the fastest and best way for you to improve your bench press, proven by science. And we're going to start right now. Okay, so we analyzed one of the papers of efficacy of daily 1 rep max bench press training in physically active males and females. We did a whole video on this, and basically what we looked at is how long and how frequently athletes could be benching on a regular basis. If they would bench press every single day, and if they did this for 38 days, what happened to their bench press? And we saw from this paper that athletes ended up having an improvement in their bench press of 29%. So my idea was that I wanted to take this and actually apply it into a real life scenario. So a lot of people out there in the YouTube space don't actually train athletes, so they don't actually have the ability to see if these freaking papers that are outrageous actually work. So I have a lot of athletes in the gym. The big thing here that I want to go over in this video is that I want to take this paper and I want to take real world application and I want to jam it together and see what ends up happening. And so that's exactly what we're going to cover. We're going to cover 4 athletes that I had. Okay, so that came in and we were in a situation where it's the end of the year for high school kids and college kids. And we had one individual who was willing to go along with this and go and see if they could push their bench press on a regular basis. And we essentially followed this specific study, but we tweaked it a little bit. And so what I want to do is I want to go into the study. Okay. We're going to do the study real quickly. Base this off of how you can increase your bench press by 29% based off of this study. And then I'm going to show you what we ended up altering slightly, okay, in our real life scenario, because we had 2 football players that are collegiate athletes, one kid who had just graduated high school, who is a high school football player, probably could have played D2, D3 football, but he's getting into strength and conditioning, and then a third kid who's an absolute dog wrestler, and he's in a situation that we wanted to increase his bench press because his bench press sucks compared to his other lifts. So the paper, okay, so if we go into this real quickly, what they ended up doing is they took 7 physically active individuals, 3 males, 4 chicks. They did a bench press every single day for 34 consecutive days. So think about this. Every single day you go into the gym and you bench every single day, every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like every day, over and over again, okay? 34 consecutive days. Each session, they would ramp up to their 1 rep max, and then they would follow with 5 sets of 3 at 85% or 5 sets of 2 at 90%. And then they had a standard taper. So on day 35, they started to back off, and they would just do a lot less volume. Day 36, day 37, they took off. Day 38, they maxed out. And when they maxed out, they could see, okay, all the participants experienced significant gains in their bench press with an absolute increase of 40 plus pounds from day 1 to peak 1 rep max. Remember, this is men and women. Absolute increase of 40 plus pounds. Okay, the males achieved a greater average absolute increase compared to the females. The males was 50 plus pounds. Okay, so we could look at that. So I want to give a shout out here to Michael Zordos because he did something similar around 1 rep max training in well-trained powerlifters and weightlifters. They did like a back squat, because I think it's cool that you can look at this and you can say, okay, you got a bench press, you got a back squat. The thing that I would say here for us was that we wanted to look at this and we said, okay, the most fundamental lifts that can transfer along a huge population, right? Bench press, back squat, front squat, I would argue cleans. A lot of you guys don't like to clean because you're just scared to actually try and push yourself and work through really hard things, and you really want to get really, really good, but instead you go do functional patterns or something like watching Joel Seaman, and you'll come up with excuses for why you should not do cleans. And so what I wanted to do was take all this and say, okay, we use bench press on a regular basis, and I don't care what you tell me, bench press has a huge correlation to performance in sports. And we can argue, and then what we can do is, instead of arguing, we can take my group of athletes with your group of athletes, and we can meet on the field, and then we can go look at all the banners, and we can talk about who's going to be more successful. I'm telling you right now, bench press has a huge impact on performance for specific sports. In this case, I would say football, wrestling, shot putting, powerlifting, obviously powerlifting. So that's where we're going to go with this. Now, in our specific case, we had 4 kids, 15 years old, 17, 19, and 19. Okay, that's what we had in our situation. We did this from May 6th. I got my clipboard here. all the way up. And what we ended up doing was we did 27 days. Okay. And so they trained 6 days a week. And the cool part here is that the one kid, Coy, actually, who's a dog wrestler, I could basically convince him, like, look, I need you to come in 6 days a week, and we're going to do this over a 5-week time frame. So it's going to end up being 27 days, and then we're going to max out on that last day, and we're going to see what happens. Okay. So we didn't want to do it at a point in the year that would have a negative impact on their football training or a negative impact on their wrestling training. We wanted to do this, one, where it would have a negative, or would not have a negative impact on their overarching training. Okay. 2, we also wanted to mitigate and make sure that they weren't going to get hurt. And if they started to have shoulder issues or pec issues, because in the original study, there's times that they talked about some athletes would back out because of their shoulders or their pecs, and then they would come back in. So that was another big factor. The third big factor, again, that I mentioned, is that we wanted to use a fundamental lift. So we bench press, perfect case scenario. We've done this with weightlifters, with back squats. We've done this. I did a 2-year squat every day front squat program that just blew up my front squat. So we knew that this would have a pretty substantial impact on their overall training, almost to the point where someone like Coy, who went through this, he's a sophomore in high school. He wrestles 152 to 160. Blew up his bench press so much that then in turn his dumbbell bench, his dips, everything just skyrocketed for him with his upper body. So as we went through this whole thing, okay, the way the week would be set up, and I'm going to go over where we started. The week would be set up where we would start on a Sunday. The differences that we did is we would do a weightlifting exercise before the bench 3 days a week. Okay, so we would do a clean and then a bench, or a snatch and a bench, but it would almost always be like a power clean or a clean before we would bench on day 1, 3, 5. Okay, 2, 4, 6. We wouldn't do that. We would bench first right away. The other factor here, we would still do a drop set. We would do 5 sets that were drop sets. So we would do ramp up, and then we would come back down, 5 doubles at 90%, or we would choose 5 triples at 85%. I would let the athletes choose that on a weekly basis. They almost all, or on a daily basis, they almost always went with the 5 triples. And we're going to talk about why. Okay. And then the other days, they would go on the days that we would just bench and then get right into it. Okay. They would train their upper body. On the days that they would clean and then they would bench, they would go back and then do a leg lift. Okay. So some of those days was like an absolute strength day. So they're going really heavy. Some of those days they would do jumps. Some of those days they would run sprints because they're football players. Okay. So the training was not set up exactly the way the paper was set up, but it was set up in a means that I knew we could get everybody on board. They would actually train this as well as possible, and they could still do other things to mitigate any loss of strength in other areas. So I do believe that there's something to be said for that, for practicality purposes. I also think there's something to be said for all these athletes have been training for more than 2+ years. They're all well trained, even though they're younger. And then the interesting part here is that there was different times that some of our football players would come home. You know, some of our guys at Penn State or Notre Dame would come home and they'd be like, yeah, what are these guys doing? They're benching every day. And I would explain to them what they were doing, and they'd sort of sit there and be like, hey, I want to try this. So it was pretty interesting. They would be home for 5 to 7 days and they would roll with it. So let's get into athlete 1. Starts at 140 kilos. It's 308 pounds. Okay. Athlete 2 starts 140 kilos, 308 pounds. Athlete 3 starts at 105 kilos. That's 231. Okay. Athlete 4 starts at 170. That's 373 pounds. So the big factor here is that we can see 2 kids basically bench 315. 1 kid's younger, benches 230. The kid who's 17 actually benches 373. He's a bit more of a meathead. We show a lot of videos of him on our Instagram. He loves to rip ammonia and just do crazy meathead stuff. Very, very strong. So we knew it would be harder to push athlete 4. We knew athlete 3 would probably be decent and we would be able to push him a lot. We just had to make sure his shoulder was okay. And athlete 1 and 2, they're pretty durable athletes. They've been training with me basically since they were in 8th grade. So I knew that they would be able to handle this volume. Now, the interesting part here is if you follow any of the stuff that we do inside of our strength training system, we have something that's called athlete reactive analysis. So we use the way our athletes react psychologically inside of their periodization. Okay, so we have 3 types of athletes: athlete 1, 2, 3. Athlete 1's a Zen, athlete 2 is social, athlete 3 is the energetic meathead. What I think we see in the results, which we're going to get into here, is that you can almost get a read on how they respond physically to this just based off of, or how they respond as an athlete psychologically, just by looking at the physiological adaptations that they make, which I find very, very interesting. It sort of correlates pretty well because they just handle the stress well. If they're a Zen athlete, if they're social or they're energetic, they're a little bit more up and down. This is stuff that we put together inside of all of our periodization, all of our programming. Now, this periodization model is much more of this super high volume. The high volume work that we tend to do is exactly what you guys would get inside of Peak Strength. Peak Strength is our strength training app where we've designed the entire program based around how we've trained thousands of athletes to become All-Americans, to become state champions, to go to the Olympics, to go to the NFL. And that's available to you guys. So if you have a lagging lift like a bench press, a clean, maybe your wrists are a little bit weak, or you don't know how to rack the clean properly, or you're just not that explosive, click the first link in the description. Okay, the first link in the description, you can go to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You download Peak Strength and you're going to get a full week of free training. So you get to test out the app for a week for free, and then you can recognize, like, yeah, I got to get my bench press up. How's our kid that's going into 10th grade who benches, he's going to end up benching 122 kilos at the end of this. It's a pretty big improvement. It's because of the foundational work that we've laid out. So we start at 140. Okay, for 2 of these athletes, we start at 105 for athlete 3, athlete 4, 170. So he's good, right? The biggest thing I wanted to bring up is that when we're looking at the progress that athlete 1 makes, okay, so athlete 1 is an individual who goes through and pretty early is just getting slaughtered, right? He's just getting absolutely trashed by the lifts. And you could almost see this on a daily basis where it was like, yo, he's just absolutely getting torched. But by around day 6 and day 5, actually day 5, he finally hits 145 kilos. So he goes up on day 5. So he had 4 days that he was either at 140 or below. Okay, and this is an interesting factor that I want to bring up related to the athlete reactive analysis, is that we can see on a daily basis these athletes are just, they're handling it in one way or the other. They're either getting destroyed or they're like, oh, I don't mind this, I can just keep rolling. So by day 5, he hits 145. By day 6, he benches 150. So now he's gone up 10 kilos. That's 22 pounds. Just in around 6 days, but his first 4 days, he's hurting, right? Now, once he hits that at the end of the week, he sort of maintains this point for an extended period. He sits around 150 for almost 10 days, okay? And then when we are getting to that day 27, so we had a Saturday off. Okay, so we were doing our heavy lift on a Friday. We had our Saturday off, and then we maxed out on Sunday. So that helped me prevent them from going out and drinking. So we end up maxing on Sunday, and by Sunday, this athlete benches 157 kilos on day 27, which is a 17 kilo improvement. So that ends up being... I gotta get my calculator out because 17 kilos is a little weird for me. Let's see, 17 times 2.2. Whoops, 17 times 2.205. That's 37 pounds. And he already was benching 315, so that's pretty freaking good. That actually puts us not as close to the research paper, which was 50 pounds, but still pretty freaking good while they're still doing other lifts. Okay, so that's a 17K improvement. So for him, we're seeing a 12% increase in 27 days. The biggest regret that I have is I wish on the day we started, I wish I would have tested their clean, because this individual was failing at like 110s because he hadn't been home for a little bit. So I wish we would have tested the clean, or at least had that written down. I have everything else written down, but not that. Now, athlete 2. Okay, this is another great one. Starts at 140 kilos. He stays at 140 kilos for 15 days. Now, Connor ends up by, like, there's some days he's benching like 280. So he benches 140, 135, and then just plummets. Like, dude was getting thrashed by the intensity. Goes down and has like 4 days at 130. Day 11, 12, 13, 14, comes back and hits 140. And then all of a sudden, right around day 18, day 19, or day 16, he hits 145. And then day 18, he hits 150. Builds up, hits 150 like 3 or 4 more times, and then just skyrockets. So he has this like severe drop off where he's just down, 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 down. And then all of a sudden he gets back up and starts climbing back up. And then as he's climbing back up, every single day he's smashing it. Connor, what's crazy here, also end up cleaning like 155 kilos. This is a kid who weighs 175 pounds. So he cleans 155 kilos. He increases his front squat during this time frame. His bench press goes from 140 to 160. So he increases by 20 kilos, which is 44 pounds. That's a 14.3% improvement. And the biggest factor here that I want everybody to remember is that some of the individuals in the research paper were untrained for like 2 or 3 years. Like, they had lifted in the past but hadn't lifted recently. So 2 or 3 years of not training. These individuals are all well-trained individuals, okay? Hits at 160. It's a 14% increase. It's a 44 pound improvement, and ends up benching 160, which is 353 pounds, which is freaking phenomenal with that huge clean as well. He also ends up single leg squatting later on, about 2 to 3 weeks later. He ends up single leg squatting 190 kilos. And the reason why I'm bringing these things up is that Connor went through this process and actually developed and ends up hitting big lifts in all the other lifts. And that's where I think when you're lifting really heavy on a regular basis, everything starts to blow up. The thing I want to bring up, because the last 2 athletes that we're going to cover, is that the thing I want to bring up is that we would do the 5 triples or the 5 doubles as drop sets, but we would also do a lot of back work. We would do a lot of shoulder dumbbell external rotation work. We would try and push the dumbbell external rotation work up to like 30-pound dumbbells, so it was pretty heavy. We do a lot of Ys on the incline. We did a lot of back work, and we did a lot of scorpion stretch, door stretch, to try and lengthen the lats to make sure that they could handle doing this. I think that's one thing that in the actual paper, they don't cover that as well. Now, athlete 3, this is a kid who's going into 10th grade. Benches 105 kilos basically every single day until day 8. That's when he hits 107 kilos, which is 231. Now, he hits 107, and then he hits 110 kilos, and then comes back to 107 and back to 110. Literally, it's like every other day. He's going back and forth, back and forth. He's the one that had a bench press that I knew. I was like, let's push him on this to try and really see if we can improve this. And then by the time he's going back and forth, and then all of a sudden on day 20, he hits 115. Then he hits 117 and a half. 4 days in a row. 4 days in a row, he hits 117 and a half. And then on the last day, 27, he benches 122 kilos. So it's 270 pounds, okay? So this is really, like, stupid good. 16% increase. Okay, 17 kilos overall. So we can see this kid go from 105 to 122. So 230 to 270 about. 16% increase. And all during this time, he ends up cleaning 115 kilos. And he's a 160-pound wrestler. Single leg squats. The one day he single leg squatted so heavy after we benched, he actually got stress headaches from his single leg squat. He hit 115 for 3 sets of 5 on each leg and had a huge headache. But over that time frame, he just kept rolling with it. Now, he did have some shoulder issues. There was one day here on day 20 that we had backed off. No, it's actually day 19, 20, 18 or 20, 18 or 19. Sorry, that we backed off and he didn't bench. But the improvement was there. Now, going back over this, come in, they clean, they bench, or they come in, they warm up and they bench, and they would do doubles on the way up till they hit a max, then they drop down. Now, athlete number 4, this is Derek. biggest meathead. He's cleaned 320, back squats very well, single leg squats well. He's actually pretty fast as well. Runs like a 4.7, 540, and he's shredded, pretty jacked. He comes in, he couldn't repeat, so he hits 170 kilos. He couldn't go heavier until day 12. So for 12 days, he's just warming up, gets up, and just gets pissed every single day. He's sniffing ammonia. He's getting mad. Then his bicep and shoulder and pec starts hurting him like crazy. So there's one day that he ends up on day 19 or day 12. He gets up and he hits 175. Okay, so he hits 175 on day 12. Then he's crying his shoulder. He feels like he's going to blow out his shoulder and his bicep and his pec. So we take 3 days off from benching, and he's just doing the cleans, and he's just doing the back work. He's still training, but he's backing off of that. When he comes back on day 19, he actually PRs and hits 180 kilos. So keep in mind, this is a kid that just graduated high school, benches 180 kilos, 396. Okay. Now, he hits that 180, and then after he hits 180, he's done. For the next, 9 days, he can't get past 170. On day 27, he hits 175, which is 5 kilos more than he had originally hit. So technically, he only had a 5K increase on day 27. We could argue he did have a 10 kilo increase, which would put him, I think that's a 3.5% improvement overall. And if we look at that weight at where he was, starting at 170, we're seeing like that's a pretty substantial improvement. The issue with someone that is that strong is it's a lot of stress on a daily basis. It's a huge issue with their fatigue on a daily basis when they're, and he only weighs about 215. That ends up beating you up. And that's where once we had the shoulder and the pec, he started to complain about the pec. And I said, let's back off. I want you to do these stretches. I want you to do this back work. And then when we come back after 3 or 4 days, let's see how you feel. So it was something that you have to play, essentially at that level. You got to be a little bit more aware. Now, he's also younger, so I knew he could handle that a bit more, which is why I was willing to roll forward with it. And I think when we're looking at all of these things, everybody increased except for Derek the entire way through, okay? With Derek, it was sort of like flat, up, and then flatten off again. He's a more experienced lifter. It's going to be a lot harder, but getting in that volume at that intensity is one of the biggest benefits of doing this every single day. The other aspect is that you get into a groove. You start to feel the groove. And there's something in, if you follow weightlifting, and it's known as like Bulgarian training, where you just max out every single day, there's something in training like that that they'll say is like going into the dark zone, like you're going into the dark, that you just have like 5 to 15 days where you're just dead. Like you can't feel anything. And when I trained with Anatoly Bondarchuk, one of the things that we did was we would have like full blown programs where you weren't coordinated. You would feel so unathletic. But if you kept going, you come out on the other end like feeling like a machine. And it's pretty similar here. I think the issue is that, especially if you're training somebody with these other things in mind, I think you've got to just be a little bit more aware and a little bit more dialed into what can lead to fatigue. The interesting part too with the bench press that I want to bring up is that it's a lot harder to do every day than squatting. Squatting, you can do every single day. Pulls, I actually think you can do every single day. I don't think you can go to max, but I think you can go pretty freaking heavy every single day. There's something about the bench where there's some days that you do feel that stress and that discomfort and you can't go forward. Otherwise something bad will happen. And I think it's likely because there's a lot of weaker muscles relative in joints that provide stability that can lead to some type of issue. There's also more joints at play, your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder. I think all of those like little movements can just lead to issues, especially when you're talking about a joint like your shoulder. So my takeaway here, 1, benching every day works like 100%. If you're stuck at a stalemate and you're plateaued, bench every day for a minimum of 3 weeks and see what happens. Okay. 2, make sure that you're setting this up in the year without it having some type of negative impact on you for your overarching goal. So if you have a goal and like, I got to get like 20 pounds on my bench quick, do it. Just roll with it. Like, just go do this every single day for 20 to 27 days. But also make sure that you're doing this other work. I think that's one thing when you look at the study, I think you can get away with a little more and get more results with people who are not as trained. I think I want to try something where we would do like a dumbbell bench every other day, that we do the big heavy bench. I want to make sure I'm paying more attention, and in the future when we do this, this is something I do want to do like May into June, because I think this is where I could be doing tests with their cleans as well to see relative to their bench press. So this is fun. The guys liked it, but there's days that you come in and you're just like, it's almost like they're hungover. And it's groggy. And that's the thing with a test like this. And that's the thing with this type of experiment. I wanted to share this with you. I think that's the big positive aspect around what we do here at Garage Strength, is that we are trying and actually training and experimenting on a regular basis. And this is one of the most grueling experiments that we've ever put into play, but we've got phenomenal results. I want to share more things like this with you guys, is what we're doing on site to help our athletes get to that next level. If you guys need help with your training, again, click that first link in the description, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store, and you can start training with us today to take your training and your performance to the next level. If you like content like this, click on this card right here, because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.